a better understanding of our courts and what we do, and that is the foundation of why we are here today. And with that said, I'm Judge Lenore Driggs. I'm the Justice of the Peace for the Arcadia Biltmore Justice Precinct, which is in East Phoenix, and have been a judge for about 9 years, and since July 1st, I became the presiding Justice of the Peace. And I have with me Judge Jennifer Germain, who's the Associate Presiding Justice of the Peace for the San Marcos Justice Court out in the East Valley. And then I have Judge Heidi Owens, who is the White Tank Justice of the Peace, and we're going to hear about her court because that's one of the really busy ones, and so she's here to kind of testify as to how things are going over there with her. And then I also brought with us our newly appointed court administrator, Jennifer Harold, and we're really grateful to have her. Sorry, that was the introduction. And so we're going to talk about a lot of things this morning to help go through the legal and business reasons behind this plan. Courts use a lot of words that are specific to us and which may not be familiar to you, and so we just want to, make sure you understand everything about our courts, and we want to make sure this is as simple and understandable as possible from start to finish. So let's just get going with some of the basics. All right, so with the courts, when it comes to Arizona, we have federal courts and we have state courts. The federal courts handle cases involving federal law, such as the U.S. Constitution, bankruptcy, immigration, and then we have the state courts, which that's where our justice courts are in the state courts. We're controlled and authorized by our state laws, the state constitution, and rules from the highest court in the state, our Arizona Supreme Court, which is a court of appeals. Below the Supreme Court, we have the Superior Court, and this is where you hear most of the cases that are in the news. Like felony crimes go there, such as kidnapping, homicide, arson, as well as crimes committed by juveniles. They also see big family court cases dealing with custody, probate, and then the big civil money cases, such as medical malpractice, insurance fraud, those kind of things go to the Superior Court. Then below you have the municipal and city courts, and then the justice courts. And the justice courts are what we are. And the average person is far more likely to go to a justice court than to any other court. And this is because the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office and the Department of Highway Safety all cite their tickets into our courts. We get traffic tickets from all of the highways and lakes that go through the county. These include the 101, the 202, the 303, the 51, the I-10. If any of these agencies stop you for a traffic violation, such as speeding, talking on your phone while driving, a DUI, those cases come to our court, and you'll mostly likely see us. If you're at one of the lakes in the county and you get a citation, you're probably coming to a justice court. These traffic tickets make up 40% of our workload. We also handle criminal misdemeanors such as assault, trespassing, disorderly conduct, contracting without a license, shoplifting, and other petty crimes such as selling tobacco to a minor. On the civil side, we issue orders of protection, injunctions against harassment, and we hear civil lawsuits of $10,000 or less. These include debt collection cases, neighbors suing neighbors, and then evictions. We also have the small claims cases that just went up to the minimum of $5,000 or less. But the evictions are the high volume cases that we have, and that's why you see a lot of eviction coverage in the media right now. So here's some data from the last 5 years, and I want you to please note that the pandemic, affected 2020 and 2021, but since then you can see there's been a steady climb in our case filings. In 2024, we had 331,191 case filings. In the first 6 months of 2025, halfway through the year, we saw more than 160,000 case filings. So if this trend holds true, we will surpass or match last year's numbers by December. And obviously, no one court can handle so many cases, and the state legislators understood that, and that is why we have the laws The state law as contained in the Arizona Revised Statutes, Title 22, Section 101, directs each county's Board of Supervisors to divide the county into as many justice precincts as necessary to timely manage the caseload and serve the public. There is one for each justice precinct. In Maricopa County, we have 26 precincts, and like I said, mine is the Arcadia-Biltmore Justice Court. The number of justice precincts in each county is determined by a formula that counts all of the cases we receive and then assigns a point value to each type of case. Those points are called judicial productivity credits, or as we call them, JPCs, and that's an important term here. Okay, so remember JPCs. For example, let's look at Judge Owen's court, the White Tank Justice Court in the West Valley. In calendar year 2024, her court received just under 20,000 cases. And then once the formula was applied to those cases, that turned into 1,403 JPCs. That same state law that I referenced also says that if a justice court has more than 1,200 JPCs in a year, the Board of Supervisors shall create sufficient courts or redraw the justice court precinct boundaries according to Section 22-101 in order to reduce the judicial productivity credits for any precinct which exceeds that limit. Unfortunately, White Tank is not our only court that is exceeding that 1,200 JPC threshold. Let's look at this data from January when we were ramping up our deep dive into this issue. The Country Meadows and Hassayampa Justice Courts are also in the West Valley, were higher than the 1,200 JPC limit. Santan Justice Precinct over in the East Valley was at 1,199, 1 JPC away from the threshold. And then 8 other justice courts were above 1,000 JPCs, and 900 is kind of like our perfect range right there. If you could be around 900, that's the goal. And this was 8 months ago. Now, take a look at our numbers. Those 4 courts have continued to grow, and since then they are all over the limit. The 2 busiest courts in the county, White Tank and Country Meadows, have both experienced an 8.6% increase in less than a year. And those 8 other courts have grown as well. Now here's a list showing where each of our 26 courts stood in the last month, so in August 1st. So we have 4 courts in the pink and red, and that's over 1,200 JPCs, the legal threshold. And then we have 8 courts that are in the yellow. That's the 1,000 to 1,200. That's high, but they're not over 1,200. And then we have the courts in the green who are in our perfect range. That would be between 800 and 1,000. And then there are 4 courts down below, just below the perfect range. And I just want you to keep in mind that Ironwood is considered to us a part-time court, and it's not because they don't do a lot of work. He also hears the town's cases, and they're just not included in our formula of JPCs. So if you can remember, we did work with the county recorder and the Board of Supervisors 4 years ago to redraw precincts when we had 2 courts that were above the limit. That worked for a while, but here we are again, and we believe moving boundaries like we did then is not going to be enough to carry us into the future. So we began the current process almost a year ago because we could see that our case filings kept rising. And honestly, the only way that White Tank Justice Court has been able to keep up is through a lot of effort. And we'll let Judge Owens just kind of speak to how they've been surviving.
Sure, thank you. And thank you for the board for hearing us this morning. So yes, to kind of add a little bit to what Judge Driggs was saying about the numbers, I just want to kind of give you a little bit more, particularly from White Tank's perspective. I just started tracking the JPCs as we started this process. So back in May of 2024, my JPCs in the White Tank Justice Court precinct was 1,145. By November of 2024, it was 1,337. And then by today, 1,568. So when you take that, I know that Judge Driggs gave you the percentage, but just in 16 months, that's 423 JPCs that's been added in just 16 months, if that helps kind of put that to perspective, the amount of growth that's happening. A part of the reason why we're having such a hard time with just moving the lines, like Judge Driggs was saying, is because if you look at the top there, White Tank, Country Meadows, and Hacienda, all three of those precincts border each other. There's just nowhere to go. There's nowhere to move those lines. So we're struggling to figure out what to do other than, of course, adding another court. So with my experience with White Tank Justice Court Precinct, it came upon us pretty quickly, and we are having a hard time keeping up. Luckily, there's been a couple of courts that have loaned positions to us, Arcadia Biltmore being one of them. So we have 2 positions on loan that we're using, and that's helped significantly, but we are now at the point where we are maxed out on desks. Our entire bullpen is full of employees at this point, and it is still not enough to manage the growth that's happening. Especially when you consider the amount that the growth is going to continue to happen. Because White Tank is not just Goodyear and Buckeye, it actually is most of Waddell. There is some of Surprise and some of Litchfield as well, and Waddell is also an area that's growing significantly. So we are going to continue to just see this go up and up and up, and we are at physically max capacity with the amount of staff that we can house in our area. And we're just trying our best. My staffs, they're great. They're rock stars. They are working with it. They're sticking with it. We're still keeping it organized and moving as efficiently as we can. But I am starting to see those errors starting, and because they're being rushed, and so I'm starting to see that more and more and more. It's starting to kind of seep in, and particularly, I know that there's been some staff burnout. We are at the crux of potentially losing some staff. I know one that we're going to be losing this week. And I know of, and I'm not going into too much detail, but I know of a staff member that was actually having some heart issues and had to do a monitor to determine what's going on, and it was determined it was stress related, and that monitor was clearly showing that it was spiking while at work because she's just doing more work than she should be able to do in an 8-hour workday. So we're hanging in there, we're getting help, but it's getting to that point where it's too much.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question? Supervisor Garland. Thank you, and I want, let's go back, if it's okay, Mr. Chairman, or should we wait for the end of the presentation? Oh, okay. So in your court, because out there, we're familiar with the West Valley, growth is booming. It is. It's where folks are moving. There's always new development, new businesses. It's just booming out there. In terms of the caseload that you're seeing, the increase of the JPCs, is it criminal, traffic? Is it civil? Because correct me if I'm wrong. Because some of these, like the evictions, pretty easy. I mean, very few. Correct me if I'm wrong. Very few people will contest that. So it's kind of just paperwork, moving paperwork. But what is contributing to that increase?
Sure. And that is the reason why there is the formula for the JPCs, because it takes into consideration which caseload takes more time than other caseloads. So that's why it's trying to be as accurate of a depiction of how busy the court is, because you are correct. Some case types don't take as much time as other case types. I will tell you, in White Tank, we're seeing it across the board. With evictions, we used to be probably 14th, 15th on the list. We're now up to 7th. With the criminal, that has increased as well, so, pretty significantly. Civil is where the biggest increase is coming in, is civil filings. We're getting in stacks of new complaints daily at this point. It used to be.
And those take the most time.
Yeah. What was that?
Do they take the most time?
They do.
There's much more involved, because once there's a judgment, there can be trials. Trials take a lot of your time, of your day.
Can do PTCs,
Yep.
garnishments that come out of them.
And then garnishments afterwards, and it's followed for a long time.
Yeah,
So-
and not to mention multiple pleadings for each case.
Yeah. So real quickly, Judge, so you indicated, this is going back to page 5 real quickly, 40% of the cases, you had indicated 40% of the casework is coming from traffic. What's the percentage for criminal and civil? What's your guess? Collectively, all courts combined.
So, and
I know every court is different
answer
because
to
of the
that is
freeway.
every court is vastly different.
Yeah, I know
so
that.
for my court out in San Marcos, we're about 75% civil. for our neighbor court, Santan, they're about 75% criminal.
You go to my court and I see 52 DUIs in the whole year, and then you go to West Mesa and she's got 100 or maybe 200 DUIs in the whole year.
I think if you want to look at it generally, and this is just my assumption, I definitely don't have the data to back this up, but I do think it is higher civil. I mean, when you just look at it across the board, but again, every court is different. But if you were to look at all of the courts and all of our filings, I'd say it's definitely not a 50-50. I want to say civil is going to be more than criminal.
And the only reason, I know this is much more complex, but from a fiscal side here, that we got to find the money to pay for all this. You look at our little blue here, very low numbers, and the public can easily say, well, why are you adding a new court? Why don't you just adjust it? Why don't you add more area to Arcadia, University, or West McDowell? I understand Ironwood, but why not adjust it where?
Perfect, and that
That's
leads into the
the
next
tough
part of
one.
our
Oh,
presentation.
okay,
So
go
we'll
ahead.
go on to that. To the
I'm
next
sorry.
slide. That's okay. So, as we made a plan for these changes, we looked at traffic citations from the last 5 years to see where they happen the most often. Traffic cases make up 40% of our workload, and it's about 100,000 per year from DPS and the sheriff's office. So we plotted those on a map. We looked at eviction filings, which make up another 25% of our workload, and then we know those numbers keep rising. We did not just look at case filings, we looked at population growth. We considered, people moving in and then also the construction. And when we have more construction, these big apartment complexes are coming into all of our areas, and that's going to mean more evictions. So then it was time to see what lines could be moved. Because we took into consideration the low courts, the high courts, and where they are all geographically. And we didn't want, zigzagging. We needed to make sure that every court was adjacent and that was touching. So any lines we moved had to be with a court that was touching each other. So you could either move into this court or move it out from that court, but it had to all be touching. And we had to make sure that our judges and our constables stayed in their own precinct. So we had to know where everybody lived, and we couldn't move them out of their precinct. So it wouldn't be fair necessarily to say, oh, we're making all these changes, and too bad you're not going to be the judge there anymore, right? Or the constable. So that was
the legislature.
right. Well, we weren't doing that to each other, so we didn't do that. So let's look at another map. So here we have a map of the White Tank precinct, and this shows that Country Meadows down below and Hassayampa up above all share borders with White Tank, and those are those 3 high-volume justice courts that showed you in the red. And they are busier than they should be with a lot more JPCs. Oh, thank you. So our plan, and what we believe makes the most sense, is to divide White Tank in 2 geographically, like divide it in half horizontally along the I-10. The top half would keep the name White Tank and would keep the judge, Judge Owens, and she would need a new constable because the bottom half would draw her out of that, and then it would need a new judge, but the current constable lives in the bottom half. So that new court would get a new judge and keep the current constable. And it would also need a new name, which that would be up to Judge it's not Judge, sorry, to Supervisor Lesko. And then over here, we look at Santan, which is that 4th court that's over 1,200. He's in the farmost southeast corner. And for this one, we didn't need to split it because we were able to move some of his voting precincts into East Mesa and North Mesa to absorb those numbers because those were lower JPC courts. And so they're able to absorb some of his work into their courts, and that's how we're able to balance for that area right there.
Judge Driggs, sorry. So a question on this one regarding Santan Justice Courts. This map you're showing is the proposed lines or the current lines?
We'll get to that. This is just
Okay.
kind of like a quick view of what Santan looks like way there in the corner, and
Yep.
he's over the 1,200.
Okay,
So
thank you.
We'll keep going. All right, so here's the proposal. So taking into account the total workload in the county, and like I was telling you before, the perfect balance would be around 900 JPCs per court. With the goal of getting all those courts in that range, we mocked up a map with new boundaries, including the white tank split. And here you can see what that would look like. And you can see with the white tank would be the top part in blue, and then below it in purple would be the new precinct. And here zoomed in, you can see that white tank, after it's split, it would take some of Hassayampa on the north, and then it would take some of Country Meadows, which is that other busy court on its east side. And so that way, White Tank takes some of the numbers away from Country Meadows and Hassayampa, and then that new court down below has enough numbers to get it in that sweet range. Okay, so you can see the same thing over here in East and Santan. In that corner, so he's in the manila color down there in the corner, and then we have East Mesa in the yellow taking some of his, and then North Mesa also taking part of his as well. And then that's how we were able to balance the numbers. And if you look, you can see there's other boundaries that have been moved, because we didn't just do these courts. We tried to talk to every judge where we could find making it balanced. So you saw that my court was low. I needed to bring my numbers up. So by moving some numbers into my court and then some numbers from the court that I took from over to the west, we tried to push west as much as possible. So we just kind of all pushed our numbers to help us balance. And so, you know, it's where you mentioned that why not close a court? Well, because we have so many JPCs overall that it doesn't make sense to close a court, especially the growth in the west. It doesn't make sense to close anything.
But Judge, at the same time, I mean, let's be real. We're going to be addressing this again in
Yes.
2 or 3 years.
We are.
And that's the problem, I think. It's like we should not, it's not fair to the voters. It's not for them to be in Hassayampa, and then all of a sudden now they're in a different justice. It's just not fair to the voters. So how do you, I mean, I'm not trying to decide this here, but I think in the future, and I wish I had an answer, how should this be done where we're not having to address this every
Right.
4
Well, if we
years?
didn't have
It's like-
spending caps and we didn't have budgets and
Yeah.
any worry about that, we would just build maybe 4 new courts and then have them ready for when we need to move into them. And,
Because that's how we created the Southwest Court, with the understanding that we would.
yes.
I think
And there is
there's
a
2
shell there,
Yeah.
but we can't just move into it because it's just a shell. It still takes a big budget, and it still takes a judge, it takes staff. It's going to be like $1.2 million to just open that court, even though there's just a shell. But, you know, we couldn't do it before there were over the statutory limits of 1,200 JPCs, but we were prepared, and there is a shell there, so that's helpful.
And Judge Riggs, if I could just jump in, you are correct. At the Southwest Regional Center, which is where White Tanks is housed, there are 2 additional spots for courts. So it was always known that there was going to need to be new courts in the West Valley, and the building is prepared for that. One of those courts is currently a shell, and that is the one that is planned to be built out for the new court if approved. The other court in the building is actually housed by adult probation right now for the Superior Court. So we actually only have one spot for court currently. Now, if adult probation ever moves out, then of course we'll have the spot for the second court. Because ultimately, you are correct, at some point there will need to be another court in the West Valley with the growth that's happening, not only in the Hassayampa precinct, the White Tank precinct, but also a little bit east of those 2 precincts as well. And I understand your concerns. I mean, in a perfect world, I think 2 courts approval now would be like appropriate for the West Valley, but there are the other courts to consider, and it's hard to kind of figure out where that shift should occur. So what we try to do with this is to shift as much as we could to the West Valley, so that way, or I guess away from the West Valley, to even out those numbers as much as possible, to push that second court in the West Valley as much as we possibly can out. Because I know it's hard. It's a hard ask to say, hey, open 2 courts for us, right? And especially if we don't have a spot for the second court. So we were trying with this proposal to shift as much as we can towards Phoenix area from the West Valley to push out that second court as much as we possibly can.
Let me just
Yes.
let me throw this out there, and we could talk.
No,
later.
and it's also important to know that it's not just the West Valley that's growing.
It's easy, yeah.
When we come back next time, we're probably going to be asking for East Valley too, because we're absorbing everything that we can absorb on the East Valley, and everybody's going to be pushed over that 1,000-point mark with this shift in the East Valley.
So this question is the one that's going to just blow stuff up here, but but I'm gonna throw it out there. Is there a possibility of consolidating two of the justice courts that don't have the workload close to 1,200?
So, and
I know that's, people get upset, but,
with the redrawing of the lines, everybody will be between 900 and 1,000. So,
and that's the
We'll
magic.
show you, it's coming up.
and our statutory limit is 1,200, and that is just because that's as much as a single court can physically handle. And even though the eviction cases are quick for the judge, they're not quick for the staff. There's a lot of staff time that goes into eviction cases.
Yeah, I mean, there is a reason why that limit is at 1,200, because I'm seeing it now, you know, we can't serve the constituents as best as we should if the court is too busy.
Yeah.
You know, which is why the state legislature put this in place. And with the growth that's happening around Maricopa County, you know, we can't not add courts with the growth that's happening, because these courts can't manage that big of a caseload.
Yeah, and statutorily, a full-time court is 500 JPCs. So my court is sitting right at about 1,000, and I'm working 6 days a week to try to keep up with the load.
And statutorily, it's 500 JPs?
500 is a full-time court
Right.
under statute.
But is it literally a full-time court? I get it, what statute says.
Yes.
But is the judge working 4 or 5 days a week? Is the staff?
Yes.
Okay, they are.
Yes.
Even under 500?
Yes.
But we're also not asking for a court to be at
I know, no.
500. I mean, with
Where-
the
But-
lines that we're moving,
but-
it's
but-
not
saying
900.
What I'm getting at is, though, there has to be a way where we're not addressing this every 3 years, 4 years. There has to be a way. When you do legislative and congressional, you do it every, I know it's much different
Yeah.
because we're looking at populations, you have to have equal population, you have a small threshold, you know, it's much different, this is much different. But I really believe, and it may be a legislative change too, there has to be a way where we're not addressing this every 2 or 4 years.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is.
Well, and one of the things that we did coming into this too was do a deep dive into city planning offices and see where that construction is going in the next 5 years so that we could better anticipate the growth. And did a lot of deep dive into our data to be able to minutia out how long it takes to do a certain type of case type and what kind of staffing goes into all of that and how it gets calculated through statute.
Because that's really, that's great to do that. Because I really do believe there's another side to it, and that's the voters, and it's just not fair to them to be moved in a 10-year span. You're gonna be in 3 different courts, guys. Get ready. You're gonna be here, here, and here, and that's a
But it's
possibility.
a little different than being moved from a legislative district. When you're in a,
I'm not
justice
talking,
precinct,
no, I'm not talking about,
because they don't really notice that they're being moved to a different court. Most people don't know what the JP does,
Yeah,
right? You go
but-
knock
but-
on
but we
doors
don't
and say, will you
govern-
sign
I
my
don't
petition?
govern
They
that
don't
way.
know,
I
right?
don't govern that way. I don't.
Yeah, so I'm just saying, like,
Yeah.
for voters, as far as being moved into a different justice precinct, I mean, we're the last on the ballot. They don't usually know. If you ask who's your JP, I mean, you
You probably
said
don't
I'm
know.
your JP, but most people don't know who their JP is, and they don't know which. And I'm just saying that's,
Yeah,
as far as it being unfair to voters, I mean, that's probably not the biggest. The biggest thing is what's fair to litigants coming in. They need their cases to be resolved quickly. So if
I
you
do
have a
agree with
jury trial and you're waiting for your jury trial, but she can't set her trials out for months and months and months,
I
then
wish I
it's just
can
not
speak to
fair.
that if you'd like to. Right now, we are actually into March on jury trials, and we're triple booking.
Yeah.
I mean-
I'm not, no,
It's a problem.
no, I strongly believe the justice courts are, as you said, they're most important. This is the one area with people with little pocket money can go seek justice, and they're so critical.
Right.
But at the same time, and I don't govern, I'm a strong believer, you disenfranchise one voter, that's one voter too many. I don't look at governing as, well, the vast majority of people don't know who their justice, no, I don't govern that way. I look at, what's in the best interest of every single voter. And and I know we don't have solution, we can't come up with a solution, probably a legislative change. There just has to be a better way.
And I
where we're
guess I
not
wasn't
addressing
trying to say, like, don't
Yeah.
think about the voters. I'm thinking about the customer, because we don't look at them as
That-
voters.
oh,
We look at them as customers, because we're serving them with their issues, and we are the face of courts. So how we treat them there is how they're going to think of all courts and all judges everywhere we go. And if we're highly stressed out or too busy or whatever it is, I mean, that's what they're going to see how courts are. If things take too long, things don't get resolved, that's what they're gonna remember.
No,
So
I-
again,
I
we
don't
don't see them as
standards, we have
voters, and so I didn't
errors.
mean,
No,
to
no,
brush
I-
that off. I just
yeah.
meant we see them as customers that we're serving, the public that we're serving, and they have a right to, to fair justice and
Yeah.
access to justice.
Judge Owens, what do you mean by triple booking?
So we have to like book multiple jury trials on one date, just so that way we're not setting it out a year. And then a lot of courts have to do this. It happens in Superior Court as well. It's something that we haven't had to do in my court until more recently, where we're having to set 3 jury trials and the hopes that at least 2 of them end up resolving through a plea, which can happen. But sometimes if we get to the point where there is maybe two jury trials left on that day, then the oldest one goes first. And everyone knows that the next one's just going to get pushed back. It's the only way in which we can manage our calendar to, because jury trials take away from our regular calendar.
Yep. And then Judge Driggs, you talk about the goal is to be at 900. Is 900 manageable or still too much? Is it still, you guys are still very busy at 900?
It's manageable, and
Yeah,
it's
900
it's
Okay.
busy, but it's manageable. I mean, we have one court who, she didn't want to give up any of her precincts because they're at 1,000. They like it, they're working well there, and, they just like to be able to work and get their things done, and they were good at 1,000. And again, it just depends on what kind of cases you have in your court. So if you're, 1,000 and it's all these evictions, it's a little bit more manageable than 1,000 of all just, DUIs and the big civil cases that are more complex and take more time.
Thank you. Madam
Yeah.
Vice Chair.
Thank you. Speaking to Supervisor Gallardo's point, he's right. That there's too many changes, too many turnovers, and so I guess what I'm wondering is, have you all looked at, this approach is exceptionally researched and documented. What do other counties do? Have you looked at any other counties in the state and how they manage growth?
Yeah, so right now, the other counties are not experiencing what Maricopa is experiencing with growth. Pima County right now is going through deconsolidation. So they had their justice court consolidated the same way that Superior Court does, where they divvy it out by case type. So they are going through deconsolidation right now and re-precincting, which I think is a lot more confusing to litigants.
So could you explain what consolidating versus deconsolidating?
Yeah.
What do they
So
consolidate?
if you look at the way Pima County manages, they have one judge that just does traffic court. They have another judge that just does protective orders and domestic disputes. They have another judge who just does civil litigation. They have another judge who just does landlord-tenant. And they're all in the same building, the same way that Maricopa County has Superior Court down at East Court Tower and South Court Tower, all in the same building.
So my
So meaning
understanding
like-
is all of the constituents in Pima County will go
They
to
all
the
have to go to the county courthouse
okay.
in central Tucson.
So, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, do they necessarily go to the justice of the peace they elected? Or do they just
No.
go to a specialist?
They go to a specialist.
And that's what consolidated means. So it doesn't matter where you live. If it's a certain case, you're going to that judge. Whereas for us, it depends on where it's cited or where it happens. So my jurisdiction is just the Arcadia Biltmore Justice Precinct, and any of the citations or any of the evictions in my precinct come to my court. But the way they do it, when it's consolidated, is any evictions are going to go to that judge in the whole county. It's not separated by a judge and their jurisdictional limits to, with voting precincts.
No
Yeah.
districts, it's countywide.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
they're changing
But they
that.
still elect, and I'd have to, that's a separate conversation as to why they're changing it, but they still, each justice of the peace precinct elects their own justice of the peace.
Correct.
So along the lines of vote for me, I'm the best evictions attorney, judge you're ever going to get, or vote for me, I do civil like nobody else, or how does that work?
Not sure, and I don't know
So-
if they change, like Superior Court changes, you get a 3-year,
Okay, I just,
Rotation.
and you change rotations, and so, you'll be with family court for 3 years, then you change to criminal for 3 years, and so they just keep changing, so it's not gonna be the same.
Yeah.
Case
Whereas
by
I truly love being in my little regional center because I deal with Chandler and Sun Lakes. And when we've got landlord-tenant issues, we send them over to City of Chandler. Neighborhood Services steps in and negotiates out a settlement. And it's great being in a small town, having those services so close. And when we're looking at criminal, the vast majority of my criminal cases are contracting without a license.
And to be honest, I totally respect the fact that you've embraced this system, but have you looked at the possibility in terms of crunching the dollars, of consolidating, I think is what you called it? I mean, did you consider that or cost any of that out?
We did not consider that, but we can look into that. I don't know how that would work. I mean, this has been our system for as long as I can remember, but, you know, that's something that, you know, obviously if you wanted us to look into it, we would look into it for, you know,
Yeah,
right now.
and
this is-
Historically, the justice courts did look into saving taxpayer dollars by actually consolidating the courts into regional centers.
Yeah.
Because it used to be that the justice courts were all individual courts in individual locations. And I think this last year was the last year that we actually did the last consolidated regional center to bring the justice court. So most of these regional centers have 4 to 5 or to maybe 6 justice courts housed in them, which of course cuts down the cost due to the building and everything like that.
So is there a regional center map or display in this?
Well, we didn't bring a map.
Okay.
It's just that like the East Valley, there's 4 courts over there in their building.
Okay.
In the Chandler, there's 4 courts. In our downtown justice center, there's 5 courts. Over in the west, there's 4 courts, and then we have
Our
another
building is
court.
housed in Avondale.
Okay.
And it has 4 currently justice courts in there, but space for 6.
Well, one of the things I've learned since I came to the county is we're pay-as-you-go. So building costs a lot more than finance. I mean, you have to wait till you have the money to pay for it. So, but I appreciate Supervisor Gallardo's line
All
of
right, well-
questioning. Thank you.
If you want,
Yeah.
we'll just
One more. Supervisor Stewart has a question.
Thank you. And so I appreciate the presentation so far. It kind of gives us a good overview of what's going on, especially looking at the numbers. And thank you, Jennifer, for reaching out and kind of explaining some of this to me a few weeks ago. Some of the questions that I'm getting and some of the things that I'm thinking about today is, you know, we have a 6th Amendment requirement for a speedy trial, and we're talking about March and things like that. So I think it's a foregone conclusion that the West Valley Court, we need to make happen real quick. And I'm sitting here thinking, okay, we've got 4, maybe even 5, if you include Steve South Mountain, as they're up against the threshold right now, and the East Valley is bursting at the seams. Is there a way to move a court into the East Valley so that we can get something on the next election in November for that JP? Is there a way to lease or add space into the Chandler location? Is there room there to do something like that? And was that looked at? And then I have another follow-up.
So for the Ocotillo Center, there is, we do have a computer training room that frankly is not used anymore, because now we've moved all to virtual training and just conferences. So we do have a space where we could possibly build out another courtroom. So there is a possibility to expand the East Valley within our building. It would probably take a little bit more planning and architecture looking into it, but physical space, if we could move things around and make it work.
Thank you. And I think to Supervisor Gallardo's point, and we're just going to come back and do this again, and we have the opportunity to get in front of this now. I know Jennifer's probably side-eyeing me right now from a budget perspective, but it seems like it would make sense from a common sense perspective to look at something like that in the budget. So if my fellow supervisors are comfortable with it, I'd love to look at that, both from a budgetary perspective and a workload perspective. Not saying that we can't move forward with what we're doing today. The other thing is a couple of points were brought up about consolidation. I get the physical consolidation, but is there a possibility for consolidation of staff so that, and the other thing to that is there a short-term fix to use technology like AI to speed up the process for our customers? And I love that you call them customers, by the way. That's great.
So absolutely, yes. And we, with the regional center consolidation, we are able to back up each other's staff very quickly. So the Santan Court, which is Judge King, he will get, when he has traffic court lines, backed up out the door. So my staff will go over and just man extra windows and get his queues processed so people aren't standing in a line. And then quite often, he will send people down to my courtroom because I've got a lull while he's doing traffic court, and I can process some of his cases for him right then and there. So that's some of the way we've been able to share the load within our building.
And it works that way in our
and-
building as well.
Yeah.
The 5 courts, they help each other, the staff helps each other, and it's.
We've all been really good working together and moving towards the same goal of better customer service, honoring the Sixth Amendment right to a speedy trial, and trying to really make things work. And we've gotten some new technology in to help with translation. More people moving to the Valley means more languages, especially out in the East Valley. We've got the tech industry, which brings in more languages. So we've been working really good with some AI software and iPads for translation
good.
to be able to help people at the windows in their native languages. But we are looking at, we're moving our database systems and merging it with Superior Court. So that'll bring us a little bit more with e-filing and the AI automated on the back end. They'll still be checked by a human, but it will cut out a lot of scanning and indexing that needs to happen by a human right now.
It's good to hear. Thank you.
Madam Vice Chair.
Just a quick follow-up, Supervisor Stewart, you had a proposal, wondering, I'm trying to figure out what it was that we're maybe all going to be on board with?
Well, so I'll just reiterate what I said. To looking at another court in the East Valley, if there are budgetary opportunities there, and then we can get something on the next election so that we would be able to hire a JP for that, right? So the electors would. So since we're right up against the edge at a 900, there's 4, even 5 if you include South Mountain, that are at 900 or over 1,000. They're in the yellow and 1 in the red. Is it time for a court in the East Valley as well? And if the rest of the supervisors are comfortable with looking at the budgetary opportunity there, to take a look at that now, to get in front of it.
Supervisor Lesko.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm satisfied with what you're proposing, because if we, and I understand you're advocating for your part of town, which makes sense to me, but if you look at one of the next slides.
If we get to the next.
Yeah,
slide,
where it has the revised numbers, there's like a whole bunch of courts that are, you're gonna, like South Mountain's 1,000, I mean, even
included
Country
that, yeah.
Meadows, after the revision, is 1,131. So if we just go by numbers, we'd have to add courts all over the place. And so I personally am satisfied with the research that you've done and the proposal that you have.
Judge Driggs.
All right, so let's go back to these numbers that we were showing you, and we'll get to, and thank you. We have those courts that are here, so you've got the ones in the pink and the red that are over, the ones that are in yellow are, above the 1,000 but below 1,200, the green in the perfect range, and then the blue in the low range. So then with our proposed numbers, and this is what, you just brought up, is we have everything in green and some in yellow. So you see that there are some in yellow, but like I had mentioned before, there's a court who, they like being right there at 1,000, just over 1,000 in it, and it puts them in the yellow, but they're steady right there, and it's not part of the growth projection showing that they're going to go over. Again, Ironwood down there in the blue, that's part-time. But everybody else has been brought up into the good range or just in the 1,000. And our judges and constables and staff have all agreed that this workload would be pretty fairly balanced and will help with their filings in the court. On the next slide, while we were working on this project, Maricopa County Elections Department wanted to take this opportunity to make a few changes, but I know that he's next on the agenda, so we will just skip that and go to the population growth, and we're going to revisit the population growth. So here you see that we're in green and yellow, and on the next slide, we've ordered our courts with the highest courts, by JPCs are at the top, and then to the right is the correlating numbers of growth. Okay, so we can see that Country Meadows is going to have, 29%. The growth is going to be in Buckeye, Surprise, and Goodyear. They're up there almost 30% growth, right? And so we do know that we'll probably be back here for the West Valley, but like it was discussed, there is another shell there. It was built into that brand new building, 2 shells for 2 new courts when that time came. So we did look into it, that it was coming up. It just came so much faster than we could have planned. And then you have to remember that, like COVID, 2020 and 2021, we were dealing with COVID. There wasn't a lot of stuff we could look into in this area, in these issues, because we were dealing with how to manage COVID and get everything up to date technology-wise so that we could do virtual hearings and all of that. So, that took us away from this issue, and that's why we might be a little bit behind, So it also shows, Apache Junction, Wickenburg, they have some growth, and Queen Creek as well. And these 7 cities and towns mentioned are our high volume areas. But it's relatively lower than the west side. With all of this said, we held 2 public virtual meetings, the first one in July and another one in August. We sent out a press release and notified the public on our website and social media. We received news coverage in advance from KTAR, and between the 2 meetings, we had about 40 people attend. We have listed here the most significant questions and answers that came up. One question was about why some courts had no changes to their boundary lines or to their JPCs, and the answer was that some courts are already well balanced and they weren't, part of the problem or a part of the answer. So we left them alone, and we, moved the lines where we could with low courts, high courts, and try to balance it that way. Another question was about the timeline. If we cannot open a new court now, how will we manage? And it's tough because we've been limping along, like Judge Owens has told you, for a while, but getting help from other judges and other court staff when they have the availability has been helpful. And we've also been working with how we're going to use our resources to better help those courts. And then one big one was the concern that with us redrawing our own boundaries for our own precincts, is this gerrymandering? And the answer here is no. Like I said, we look at these people as our customers, and of course, as elected officials, we're well aware of our demographics of our precincts, but all of the judges and the constables had agreed to, not look at this as votes, to look at this as serving the public and getting done what needed to be done for the public. And, all of these moves are only making a marginal impact, and they don't change anything to the precinct, really, as far as the demographics. All right, so here we're at the end. So it's just a quick summary of what we've covered. Courts are filling up with 4 courts at or above the legal limit. You, the Board of Supervisors, will have the final decision on redoing our boundaries as we've proposed, and also opening the new court, which we hope you will approve to do both of those things. And this plan has taken months of research and data analysis, and high in our minds, as always, is how we can best serve the public. We believe that everybody has a right to a speedy trial, has a right to have timely resolution to all of their court matters, and we call this access to justice, and we believe everybody deserves it. We believe it is a solid plan, and this is helping balance the thousands of case filings that we have amongst all the 26 courts. But however, with, like we've mentioned, the population projections, we know that we will be here again in a few years. But honestly, this is just a short-term solution for a long-term problem. I mean, it's just been an explosion of growth in Maricopa County, but at least we've been able to take this deep dive now and know that we will be here in the future, and we are already prepared for what's coming in the future. And but today, what we're asking for you is to please just adopt this proposed plan that we have for you to help, alleviate the burden on the courts that are right now overly burdened and their staff. And we thank you for your interest and your attention. And we know about timing is an issue. For now, we need these lines for the, January 2026 for the election purposes. People need to know what their lines are when they're collecting signatures and what's going to be on the ballot. And we also understand if we can't open the new court until 2027. But thank you.
Judge Driggs, thank you. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I concur with Supervisor Lesko that we're kind of backed up into a corner on this in terms of maybe taking a different approach to it. But what it goes back to my days on the school facilities board, where we simply could not build schools fast enough. And there were, 3 sessions a day for 3 different groups and so here we are many years later, and a lot of those schools have severely declining enrollment for various reasons. So given your excellent research and the amount of work that you put in on this, no good deed goes unpunished. Can you look at some type of a hybrid approach going forward where it could be a combination of consolidating, really looking at where the physical court facilities are located and doing a combination approach? And then I'm hoping we'll get to the point where maybe we don't have to redistrict your customers, our voters, every 3 or 4 years, even with the hypergrowth. So thank you.
Yeah, and with the research that we have done, we've built it in a way so that we can revisit it every couple months, check on where we are at, so that we are not coming to you guys in an emergency state saying we need this now. We hope that having this base and being able to revisit it, we will have a steady plan moving forward.
And to that effect, I just wanted to clarify, look at hybrid or a differentiated approach than just this model, because I don't think it's going to work for very long. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Lesko and then Supervisor Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and judges. Remind me what the timeline is for if this is approved for having the new court completed.
So the timeline as far as approving, we need you to approve it by, the October 1st meeting, so that for the election purposes, we've got everything ready January 2026. But then there would be the election, and the new court and the new judge would go into effect in 2027, unless you were able to decide to appoint us a new judge and get that all started. Then we have some numbers of what that would cost to start a new court sooner than the 2027.
And thank you for that. How about the construction of the new court? You have the shell, but you have to make a court out of it. What is the estimate for completing construction of the new court?
As far as the timeline, do you have that, Heidi?
So,
I think, County
I
Manager.
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Lesko, I can answer that. I understand there is temporary space that if they did use pro tem, that the pro tem could operate a relief court, and then the actual court construction of the shell would be completed by the time the judge is seated in January 1st, 2027.
Supervisor Stewart.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I want to circle back on the East Valley situation. So we can bring this forward. You guys can bring an opportunity for us forward at any time. We can do a temporary judge if we need to. Is there any reason why you didn't bring forward 2 courts at this time?
So at this time, we were looking at, number one, being mindful of the taxpayer dollar.
Okay.
Number 2,
Thank you.
we had both East Mesa and North Mesa that were a little lower on their productivity credits. They were both sitting in the 800s. So we were able to split some of Santan into those 2 courts and bring all of them down to that 1,000 mark. So we were able to absorb that in the East Valley for the time being. But with the growth of Queen Creek and Apache Junction and Far East Mesa, it's only a matter of time until we need to open a new court in the East Valley as well.
And what do you think that timeline looks like based on that project? Like 16 months, you grew by 20-some%, right? And
On the West Valley.
In the
right,
West Valley.
right, I understand.
Yeah, and in the East Valley, since my time, I took office January 1st, 2021, I've seen the Santan Court go from about 750 JPCs to over 1,200 in a little less than 3 years.
Okay. Well, thank you. Well, I don't think it needs a motion for you guys to just take a look at it.
Yeah,
I'd like
we
to know
will look
what
at
your
it.
projections might be for that, but thank you very much.
Supervisor Lesko.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That brings up something. Since Santan just voted to incorporate it as a city, will that take away some of the cases? Because it will go to a city court then, correct?
No, because
No.
Santan Valley is split half in Maricopa, half in Pinal County, so they already have a Pinal County court in Santan Valley.
Okay.
So right now, the Santan Justice Court only sees the Maricopa County portion of that. But we are also in our long-range planning, working with the town of Queen Creek to set up a city court in the town of Queen Creek. And that will relieve some of the pressure on the Santan court as well. But that is several years down the road.
Madam Vice Chair.
So also thinking about cities and towns in the area and creating partnerships with them as relates to facilities. I continue to be stumped, but agree with the county's pay-as-you-go policy. But there might be some way to forge some more intergovernmental agreements with cities and towns in your area to mitigate caseload. I'm really trying to think outside the box here, so thank you.
Yes.
We have quite a those IGAs with other
Yeah.
cities and towns, and they use us a lot.
Yes, and specifically in my court in San Marcos and our municipal court in the city of Chandler, we're across the street from each other, and we do send cases back and forth across the street if somebody has a conflict of interest. But the city court only deals with city ordinances and criminal. They don't deal with the civil litigation, which is the bulk of my docket.
Correct. I'm hearing a lot of reasons why not, but I'm looking for reasons why or what you might be able to do. And so I wanted to put that on your radar because you are three incredibly smart ladies, who really have taken a great approach to this within the existing justice of the peace model.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to thank all four of you for coming here today, and thank you for that great presentation. It was excellent. Appreciate all
Thank
your
you
hard
for
work.
having
Thank you, and
us.
good luck.
I will.
Anytime you want to come by.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 3, presentation regarding proposed 2025 voting precinct changes. Please come forward and please introduce yourselves for the folks who are in the room and watching online. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Zach Shura, Assistant County Manager for Elections and External Affairs.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'm Scott Jarrett, the Maricopa County Elections Director.
Okay, great. And you're standing in between lunch, so we'll see how fast this goes.
Okay, so
Okay.
we'll be cognizant of your time, but also be detailed enough so you have the information, the public has the
Exactly.
information
Please.
for when the board votes on
Thank you.
this on Wednesday. So you do have a presentation in front of you. Let's see if it's coming up on the, there we go. Right, so here's our brief agenda. So first we'll go through just some information about Maricopa County. I'll definitely keep that portion a little bit briefer. Then we'll talk about voting precincts, why they're important. We'll talk about the methodology that we've used to bring forward and recommend these changes to the board. We're going to talk about what this means for precinct committeemen if these changes are approved, and then happy to answer any questions that you may have. So this is just some basic information about Maricopa County, how many jurisdictions we have, the size, the number of registered voters. But one of the things I wanted to highlight on this slide is, so we are not going through a full re-precincting, right? We're targeting just 4 specific areas. And then also there are these other districts. You just heard a very thorough presentation from the Justice Court precincts. Those are what are called a bound type precinct, meaning in state statute, you cannot have a voting precinct that overlaps a Justice Court precinct. There's 2 other types of bound precincts, and those are congressional district precincts and legislative district precincts. So when you're talking about Maricopa County, So the state of Arizona has 9 congressional districts. It also has 30 legislative districts. So Maricopa County, out of those 9 congressional districts, 8 of those overlap Maricopa County. Out of the 30 legislative districts, 22 of those overlap Maricopa County. And then with those justice court precincts that we have, that's what creates a lot of cross-section of different types of districts that have a need for precincts. So currently in Maricopa County, we have 935 precincts. So precincts are the building blocks of how we build an election. So we have to, and this is based on state statute, when we report results for on the canvas that the Board of Supervisors approves, we have to build it based on precinct. And because that then shows how voters, that's the smallest geographical area that is a district, and that will then show how those voters within that district or that precinct voted. And that's very, very important to the political parties. That's very, very important to data analysts that go out there and look at how voters are voting and what they're interested in voting. So the precinct is what allows for that to happen. Also, it really helps us implement smooth in-person voting operations from logistics standpoints, because for every one of those precincts, we have to have a specific ballot style, and that really then helps us with our ballot proofing. So for this re-precincting effort, and typically we don't re-precinct unless there's some other external factor that's happening. So because the justice courts were considering doing a re-precincting effort or adding a new court, we took the opportunity to identify some very narrow, what I view as sort of low-hanging fruit type opportunities to make some changes. And those are 4 different categories we wanted to make changes for our precincts. The first was we typically like to keep our precincts smaller than about 5,000 voters, right? And that's just been our historical norm going back to the 1990s. Where we targeted that number. So, and that is, again, it helps us limit the number of ballot styles, all of those types of things by keeping those voters fewer than 5,000. And since we have had an enormous amount of growth in the West Valley and in the Southeast Valley, there are some opportunities. There's some precincts that are getting much higher than that 5,000, and there's still room for growth. So we're trying to attempt to minimize those to keep them under 5,000. The other is where the justice courts are drawing some of their precincts. Again, that's a bound district. That means a voting precinct can't overlap a justice court precinct. So when they're making a move within their lines, we're having to then to adjust a voting precinct along with that, the justice court precinct. Also, the Department of Public Safety and the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office have come to us and asked us to align some of the Justice Court precinct lines and the voting precinct lines with the medians of freeways or the edges of freeways. So because those legislative districts or congressional districts are a bound precinct, when the Independent Redistricting Commission draws those, sometimes they don't draw it as precisely where it's right on the median of the freeway or the highway. They'll draw it through travel lanes. And so they have asked us to move those right into the median. So that's one of the other areas that we're looking at. Also, there's an opportunity for us to eliminate precincts that are no voter precincts. So this is because state statute requires that every portion of the geography in Maricopa County has a precinct. And then if there is a legislative district precinct or a congressional district precinct that creates this tiny little sliver of land, but they're not overlapping perfectly, we have to draw a precinct. And then when the Independent Redistricting Commission redraws their boundaries after the decennial census, then we have the opportunity to eliminate those no voter precincts. So those are really the primary areas. And the last area we wanted to focus on is since the 2022 census and the statewide redistricting, some cities and towns have done redistricting as well. And that's forced or caused a situation where some of our precincts are splitting like some of the city wards, so the city districts. So we want to eliminate those as much as possible, so we'd have one precinct per that one city district or a school district if they have different wards. So the changes that we're recommending, 739 of the 935 precincts are not changing at all based on this recommendation. But we will be recommending changes to 178 precincts. We're removing 18 precincts, or recommending removing 18 precincts. 17 of those are those no voter precincts. And then recommending 39 new precincts. So this next area are those situations or scenarios that are just described, but I want to highlight that the numbers in this won't necessarily reconcile with the numbers above, because sometimes a change that we're making falls into multiple categories. For example, we might be eliminating or reducing the size of a precinct to less than 5,000 voters, but it's also eliminating a split. Right, so those would then be counted in both of those categories below, but those are the stats.
So there's overlap.
There is overlap.
Okay, thank you.
So I wanted to show you just some of the, visually in some of the maps that we have, some of these different scenarios. Now, all of these maps and all of these recommended changes, you can go to the Maricopa County Elections Department's website, and you can see every single specific change that we're recommending to all of these precincts. So this is a no voter precinct situation. Now, the no voter precinct is so small, you really can't see what's happening here. So I've created another slide where you can see it a little bit better. So here we are. This is actually just south of South Mountain. And there's 3 no voter precincts that you can see here. And there are those little slivers that used to be created by, again, a congressional district and a legislative district, where those boundaries did not overlap exactly or precisely. So we were forced to draw a no voter precinct in this situation. Since they've gone through and redistricted, we now are free to eliminate those no voter precincts. So we're eliminating 3 in this one slide. Again, no voters are impacted. It's just merging these no voter precincts in with another adjacent precinct. The next area is the example of the aligning a precinct with a freeway or a highway. So this is out in the Southwest Valley, right along I-10. So here there are about 4 travel lanes going in each direction, plus an HOV lane, and then there's some other exits for entering and exiting the freeway. So these lanes, actually, I think they cut through the Justice Court precinct, and the voting precinct cuts through the travel lanes going eastbound. So here the Department of Public Safety asked us if we could draw that perfectly with the median of the freeway. And the reason why that's of interest to them is if they are having a traffic stop and their officer writes a citation and they happen to be right in one of those areas where it's crossing through a travel lane, and they write that citation and it goes to the wrong court, right, then that causes additional workload. So sometimes then they first file with the original court or the court that they filed it incorrectly. Then it has to be reassigned to a new court. Sometimes the traffic citation could be thrown out just because it was written, it's assigned to the wrong court when they were actually in another court. So that's why they've asked us to eliminate these situations. And the last is actually a couple situations. So this is an example. This is out in Mesa. And this is where we are trying to reduce the size of a precinct. So on this map, in the highlighted, so it's the orange, yellow, gold area of the exhibit, that's what we're really focused on. And you can see here a Pilgrim precinct. So that Pilgrim precinct, prior to this re-precinct effort, it was 6,166 total voters. And there was quite a bit of room for growth. So this precinct could have gotten much larger. But also this Pilgrim precinct overlapped Mesa District 1, which is on the left side of this precinct, and Mesa District 2. So what we're proposing is to add a new precinct here, which is Orange Precinct. So, and that's identified by those little stars, those dots. And so that would then eliminate Pilgrim from being in both Mesa District 1 and Mesa District 2, and then also bring it down below 5,000 total voters by adding the new Orange Precinct, where the majority of the new growth would occur. So these are just examples of the types of changes that we're implementing throughout the county. So the next area I wanted to highlight is what does this impact, if any, to the current precinct committeemen that are elected or appointed by the county parties. And really, there's very minimal impact to any of those precinct committeemen because they will serve, just like if you went through and did a redistricting and you drew a new legislative district or you adjusted your legislative district. Those elected officials would stay in their elected role until the next election. So that will be the same if the Board of Supervisors does vote on these precincts. The vote needs to happen by October 1st, according to state statute, but then they go into effect on January 2nd for future elections, right? And so those precinct committeemen would then know that they need to gather signatures in those new precincts to then run as a precinct committeeman in the 2026 elections. But for current party governance, current roles within the political parties, they will maintain their role all the way up until their elected term ends, which is September 30th. So very little impact on the precinct committeemen that are currently elected. The only impact would be if they want to rerun and then their precinct is changing, they would then have to collect signatures from their new precinct. Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, that's correct. They'd still have to collect signatures with their new precinct. So we have done quite a bit of gathered public comment, made this information available. We went through and did meetings with each of the Board of Supervisor districts. We let all the city and town clerks know. We advertised these on our social media. We notified the state chairs, the county chairs, and the legislative district chairs for all the different political parties. And to have these meetings to let the public know that these changes were coming and to try to gain that feedback from the community. And
how were the LD district chairs contacted? Was it email or phone call?
Mr. Chairman, we sent an email to their specific emails that are on file with the, that's advertised on their website.
Okay, and have you heard back from the state chairs and the county chairs? That at least acknowledging receipt of this information?
Mr. Chairman, we did. Okay. And actually, as part of, we just had the hand count for the CD7 special election, and the county chairs were there, and they mentioned seeing the email and then hearing back from some of the LD chairs that did attend.
Okay, thank you.
So overwhelmingly, the feedback was positive. No real comments. There was only one comment, and it's actually in Board of Supervisor District 2. Someone was wanting us not to change how we were drawing the Rio Verde precinct, but they recommended and wanted us to draw according to zip codes. And if we had done that and drawn the precinct according to zip codes, it would have cut through different communities. And that's one of the things we try to minimize is not cutting through it. Like if it's a subdivision, we try to keep that subdivision intact and in whole. So we've responded, but we're not recommending going with the change that the individual from the community wanted us to do.
Okay, and if any member of the public or someone from my district wants to get information on a proposed map, I see here you have a screenshot, but how can they access it?
Yeah, so they can go to maricopa.vote, or they can go to reprecincting.maricopa.vote. They can log in, and they'll be able to see so they'll be able to watch all those public videos. So our meetings that we had, we recorded them. We have the list of all the changes in an Excel file, and then the individual maps for each of the precinct changes by going to that website. and being able to see what's being,
If they go to maricopa.vote, is there then a tab that says, here, hey, here's the precinct redistricting information?
so Mr. Chairman, that's correct. So Maricopa.vote, you go to the top, there's these little tabs, one that says data and information. If you click on that data information tab, it'll bring a drop down, and then there'll be one for re-precincting, or redistricting, re-precincting. You can click on that, and then it'll take you to the place where you can find all the information for these changes.
Thank you. Supervisor Lesko.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Scott and Zach, thanks for the presentation. After the public web meeting that we had for Supervisor District 4, did any of the participants, or quite frankly, did anybody reach out to either of you with complaints about the new precinct lines? I think I've checked with my staff. I don't think I've heard anything, but I wanted to know if you've heard anything.
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Lesko, the only question was the one I just described from the Rio Verde precinct. Everyone else, some had some initial concerns during the live webinar, but once we walked them through the exact changes and the rationale, everyone seemed satisfied.
And Mr. Chair, and Scott and Zach, how are you planning on following up with the party leaders at the LD and county level so that they really fully understand where the precinct lines are, and so they can tell their precinct committeemen, this is the new precinct if they're affected? Are you planning to do that? Because I'm not sure that everyone really fully understands this.
Mr. Chairman, Supervisor Lesko, we'll do that in two ways. One will be, again, through the email after the board votes. If the board does approve these changes, we'll notify them through email. And then we also have a meeting on Thursday of this week to talk about the upcoming November jurisdictional election. And before every election, we invite the county chairs for the political parties in for a meeting. We have a whole slide dedicated to this re-precincting effort and what it means for them.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair and then Supervisor Stewart.
We've come a long way since Sparky, the Sun Devil mascot, and thank you for that. I wanted to specifically compliment the information that was presented, at least in the presentation that you gave to me with the color-coded maps. Your GIS guys are really cool, and thank you for handling this with such a delicate touch and so professionally.
Thank you. I'd reiterate what Supervisor Brophy-McGee just said. Your communication to the LDs and to the public at large has been phenomenal, so I appreciate that. And thanks for the presentations before we got here today, but good work.
We good? Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, we're going to take a recess and go back to executive session, and we'll break from lunch at 1 o'clock. So lunch until 1 o'clock, 25 minutes. Thank you.